Before we begin, I want you to hear this in the simplest way. This isn't about forcing the universe. It isn't about pretending life has no problems. It's about something quieter and more powerful. The reality you live in tomorrow is shaped by what your mind rehearses tonight. Not because of magic, but because your nervous system remembers patterns, your attention learns what to chase, and your habits slowly become your personality. If you're listening while you're falling asleep, you don't need to concentrate hard. You don't need to believe anything. Just let the words pass through you like calm air. Let your breathing slow down. Let the day end without you dragging it into tomorrow. Most people wake up already tired, not because they worked too much, but because their mind never truly rested. It kept running. It kept predicting. It kept fighting old battles. And over time, that inner noise becomes the lens you see everything through. You start reacting more than choosing. You start drifting more than building. And then you call it life, when really it's just a mind that never learned how to settle. So tonight, we're doing something different. We're not chasing dramatic change. We're building a rhythm, a steadier baseline, a cleaner inner atmosphere. Because when your inner world becomes less chaotic, your outer world starts feeling easier to navigate. You make better decisions. You notice better opportunities. You stop wasting energy on things that don't pay you back. In a few minutes, I'm going to walk you through 10 chapters, each one like a small door. You don't have to remember every word. Just let one idea land, one shift, one sentence that feels like it belongs to your life. That's enough. Real change doesn't happen in one night. But it does start in one night, when you stop feeding the same old patterns. And before we step into the first chapter, choose one word you want to live by for the next few days. Calm, focus, discipline, peace, courage. Don't overthink it. Pick the word that feels like you need it most. Because that word will be your anchor. We'll return to it again and again until it stops being a wish and becomes your default. 1. The hidden language of reality. Sometimes life doesn't slap you with a big event. It whispers, it repeats, it nudges. And if you've ever had a week where the same type of situation kept showing up, different faces, same feeling, you already know what I mean by the hidden language of reality. It's not about believing the universe is sending secret messages. It's about noticing that your life has patterns, and patterns are rarely meaningless. Your mind is constantly translating what happens into meaning, even when you don't notice it. That's why two people can go through the same moment and experience it completely differently. One person sees a late reply and thinks, they're busy. The other sees the same late reply and feels rejected, disrespected, abandoned. Same fact, different story. And the body reacts to the story like it's the truth. The Stoics were serious about this because they understood one thing. Most suffering isn't created by what happens. It's created by what you tell yourself about what happens. Marcus Aurelius had power, status, pressure, enemies. Yet, he kept training his mind to do one simple thing. Don't add unnecessary poison. Don't decorate a moment with panic and then complain that life feels heavy. Describe it clearly. Respond with dignity and move. That's the hidden language in a practical sense. Life shows you what your attention keeps feeding. If you're anxious, you'll notice threats everywhere. If you're resentful, you'll notice insults everywhere. If you're hungry for validation, you'll keep searching for signs that you're loved, respected, chosen. It's not magic, it's attention. And attention shapes your reality because it shapes your behavior. This is why symbols feel powerful. A song can pull you into a memory. A smell can bring back a whole chapter. A certain time on the clock can make you pause. It's not necessarily the world speaking. It's your mind revealing what it's focused on. Carl Jung had a useful way to frame it. The deeper mind doesn't always speak in logic. It speaks in images and themes. Whether you like Jung or not, you've lived the experience. Something repeats until you finally pay attention to what it's trying to show you. And here's the part that matters. Patterns don't repeat to punish you. They repeat to teach you. If you keep ending up in the same kind of friendship where you give too much and feel drained, the message isn't mysterious. It's a boundary you haven't built yet. If you keep delaying your goals, the message isn't bad luck. It's fear hiding behind planning. If you keep getting triggered by the same type of comment from people, the message might be an insecurity you keep trying to outrun instead of facing. So the superior move isn't obsessing over meanings. It's using the pattern as feedback. And this connects directly to listening while sleeping, because repetition is how the brain learns. When you repeatedly return to a clearer interpretation, one that's calmer, more honest, more grounded, you're training a new default. You're giving your mind a better home to return to when it starts spiraling. Here's the simple practice for tomorrow. When you notice a repeating situation or a familiar emotional wave, pause for a few seconds and ask, "What is this showing me about where my attention goes?" Then follow it with, "What would change if I responded differently just this one time?" Not forever, not perfectly, just once. Because one different response breaks a loop, and when a loop breaks, reality starts changing. Quietly, but for real. 2. The one law behind everything. Frequency. Have you ever noticed how your whole day can change because of something tiny? Not a major event, just a mood. You wake up a little heavy and suddenly everything feels harder. The same traffic feels insulting. The same silence feels lonely. The same small problem feels like proof you're failing. Then, on another day, you wake up lighter and the exact same life feels manageable. Even hopeful. That's the thing most people miss. Reality doesn't only happen to you. You meet it with a state, and that state decides what you notice, how you interpret, and what you do next. When people say frequency, they often mean it in a mystical way. I want to keep it practical. Frequency is your baseline. It's the emotional posture you keep returning to. Calm, tense, grateful, bitter, focused, scattered, confident, insecure. Those aren't just feelings. They're filters. They shape what your brain highlights, what it ignores, and what it assumes is true. Your brain is constantly filtering information. It has to, because there's too much. You can't consciously process everything you see and hear, so it uses shortcuts. If your nervous system is anxious, it prioritizes threats. It scans faces for disapproval. It reads neutral moments as danger. If your nervous system is steady, it prioritizes options. It spots openings. It sees problems as solvable instead of personal attacks. Same world, different channel. And here's where this becomes almost uncomfortable, because it puts responsibility back in your hands. A lot of what people call bad luck is actually a consistent state meeting, consistent choices. Not always, of course. Life can hit you unfairly, but if you stay in the same inner frequency for months, resentful, distracted, panicked, you tend to make a certain type of decision, and those decisions tend to produce a certain type of life. That's why the law behind everything isn't magic, it's mechanics. The Stoics understood this without using modern terms. They kept repeating one disciplined idea. You can't control what happens, but you can control the mind you bring to what happens. And that mind shapes the outcome more than you think, because it shapes your behavior. Marcus Aurelius wrote like a man constantly trying to guard the gates of his mind. Not because he wanted to be emotionless, but because he knew emotions can become tyrants if you don't train them. Now, you mentioned resonance and the magnetic idea. Let's translate that into something real. People respond to your state, not in a supernatural way, in a human way. Your tone, your pace, your eye contact, your breathing, your posture. All of it broadcasts your baseline. A calm person makes a room calmer. A desperate person creates pressure without realizing it. An angry person spreads tension even when they're trying to act normal. Your inner world leaks, and the world responds to what leaks. This is why someone who's centered often seems lucky. They're not necessarily blessed. They're just creating better conditions around themselves. They listen more. They speak more clearly. They take fewer impulsive risks. They recover faster. They don't burn bridges over feelings. They stay consistent long enough to earn trust. And trust is one of the most powerful invisible forces in life. It opens doors quietly. So, resonance is often this. Life mirrors your patterns. If you constantly rehearse rejection, you start walking like someone expecting rejection. You hesitate. You over-explain. You seek reassurance. You interpret small delays as disrespect. Then, you accidentally create the very outcomes you feared, because fear makes people behave in ways that push others away. That's not a moral judgment. It's a human reality. But the opposite is also true. If you rehearse steadiness, you start acting like someone who can handle outcomes. You become less needy for control. You stop chasing. You become clearer. And clarity is attractive. It doesn't just attract people, it attracts opportunities, because opportunities tend to flow toward people who are reliable and calm under pressure. This is where listening while sleeping becomes useful, but again, in a grounded way. At night, the noise drops. You're not reacting to the world. Your mind is more open to repetition, and repetition is how the brain learns. If the last hour of your night is chaos, scrolling, arguing, overstimulation, you're feeding your nervous system a frequency of agitation. You fall asleep with that rhythm, and many people wake up with it still in their body. If you fall asleep with a calmer rhythm, slower breathing, steadier words, cleaner attention, you're training a baseline, not instantly, but steadily, like tuning an instrument. Over time, your default begins to shift. And once your default shifts, your day shifts. Then your life shifts. Now here's the part I want you to actually use tomorrow, because ideas don't matter if they stay ideas. When you feel yourself sliding into a low frequency, panic, bitterness, insecurity, don't try to argue your way out of it. That often makes it worse. Instead, shift the signal. Do something physical and simple. Slow your breath for a minute. Loosen your shoulders. Lower stimulation. Give your nervous system proof that you're safe. Then ask one clean question. What would the steady version of me do next? Not the perfect version, the steady one. And then do one small action that matches that answer. One. That's enough to change the direction of the next hour, and changing the next hour is how you eventually change the next year. Then, for this chapter, if you catch yourself spiraling, then don't search for certainty. Search for steadiness. Slow the breath, pick one aligned action, and move. That is frequency turned into reality. 3. Energy moves, and it always returns. Here's a truth that feels almost too simple until you start watching it closely. Energy never just sits still. It moves through you, it moves out of you, and it leaves fingerprints on everything it touches. The way you speak, the way you react, the choices you repeat, even the things you avoid. Those are all forms of energy in motion. And sooner or later, you meet the results of that motion again. I don't mean this in a mystical, the universe is judging you way. I mean it in the way life actually works. Your inner state shapes your behavior. Your behavior shapes your outcomes. And outcomes shape what you become. That loop is relentless. It doesn't care what you intended. It responds to what you practiced. A lot of people underestimate this because they focus on single moments instead of patterns. They look at one bad day and think, life is against me, or one good day and think, I'm finally winning. But life doesn't get built on a single day. It gets built on where your energy goes most of the time. Think about the kind of energy that creates damage. It's rarely dramatic. It's small, repeated leakage. The argument you didn't need to start, the bitter comment you didn't need to make, the late-night scrolling that steals your sleep, the procrastination that turns into guilt, the constant mental rehearsal of worst-case scenarios. Those things don't just happen, you feed them and they grow into a lifestyle. Then you wake up months later and say, "Why is my life like this?" Because energy moved. And it returned as a reality. Now think about the kind of energy that builds. It's also rarely dramatic. It's quiet, repeated investment. The workout that feels boring but changes your body. The skill you practice when nobody is clapping. The conversation you handle with maturity instead of ego. The boundary you hold calmly instead of exploding. The habit of showing up even when you don't feel like it. That kind of energy looks ordinary in the moment, but it returns with interest. That's the law of exchange in real life. You trade something now, time, attention, discipline for something later, strength, trust, freedom, peace. And there's a second layer that's even more important. Energy returns as identity. People focus on external results, but the deeper return is who you become. If you constantly avoid discomfort, you become the kind of man who fears effort. If you constantly chase quick pleasure, you become the kind of man who struggles with depth. If you constantly practice steadiness, you become steady. That's not philosophy, that's training. The Stoics were almost obsessed with this because they knew character is destiny in slow motion. They didn't talk about manifesting, they talked about living in a way that makes you internally strong, no matter what happens outside. Epictetus, who understood power from the hardest angle, kept pointing people back to the one thing that always returns: your own choices. You might not control outcomes, but you control the seeds you plant. And seeds become something, whether you like it or not. This is why resentment is so expensive. It feels like it's protecting you, like it's giving you strength. But resentment is energy that keeps circulating in the same closed room. It returns as bitterness. It returns as tension in the body. It returns as a shorter temper. It returns as a mind that can't fully rest. You don't get back at the person who hurt you. You mostly hurt your future self. And the same is true for chasing attention. It feels like connection, but it often returns as emptiness. Because attention you have to beg for never becomes stable love or stable respect. It becomes a cycle. You need another hit, another message, another reassurance. Then you're surprised you feel tired all the time. So where should energy go? Put it where it compounds. Into your body, because health is a multiplier. Into a skill, because skill gives you leverage. Into your character, because your character determines what you tolerate and what you build. Into your peace, because peace is the foundation for clear decisions. And I want to make this concrete with a real example, because otherwise it stays abstract. Think about Florence Nightingale in the Crimean War in the 1850s. She didn't just care and hope reality improved. She turned care into systems: cleanliness, structure, measurement, discipline. That energy didn't return as a viral moment. It returned as lives saved, reforms made, standards changed. It returned slowly, but it returned powerfully. That's what compounding looks like. Your life works the same way, just on a smaller scale. Your daily choices create systems too. You can build a system that produces calm and strength, or a system that produces chaos and regret. Either way, the return is guaranteed. So here's how to use this chapter tomorrow without turning it into a lecture in your head. First, notice where your energy leaks. Not in a guilty way, in an honest way. Look for the moments that cost you peace and give nothing back. Then, choose one small redirection. 1, not 10. If. Then for this chapter, If you catch yourself about to spend energy on something that will leave you drained, an unnecessary argument, a proving moment, a desperate chase, a late-night spiral, then pause and redirect that energy into one small action that builds. 10 minutes of focused work, a walk, cleaning your space, preparing tomorrow, practicing a skill, anything that turns energy into growth. Because every redirection is a vote for a different future. And let me leave you with one honest question to hold tonight. What have you been feeding lately that keeps coming back to you as the same life? 4. The mind's tools: thought, attention, imagination. If you really strip life down to what you can actually work with, you'll find 3 tools sitting in your hands every day, whether you use them intentionally or not. Thought, attention, imagination. Everything you experience gets shaped by them, and if you don't pick how you use them, the world will pick for you. Thought is the first tool, and it's the one most people accidentally worship. A thought shows up, and they treat it like a verdict, like a final judgment on who they are, what will happen, what other people think, what they're capable of. But a thought is not a fact. It's an offer. It's a suggestion. Sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes it's just your nervous system guessing. You can feel this in real time. You wake up and the first thought says, "Today is going to be rough." Nothing has happened yet, but your body tightens. Your mood drops. You start scanning for evidence that confirms the thought. Then the evidence appears, not because the universe is cruel, but because you're filtering reality through that frame. It's like putting on dark glasses and then saying, "See, everything is dark." The Stoics built their entire practice around separating events from judgments. They would say, the event is neutral until you attach meaning to it. A comment can be information or it can be insult, depending on the meaning you choose. A delay can be time to think, or it can be rejection, depending on your story. That's why Marcus Aurelius kept training the same mental move. Describe things simply without decoration, because unnecessary decoration turns into unnecessary suffering. Attention is the second tool, and honestly, it might be the most powerful one. Your attention is where your life goes. You don't become what you want, you become what you consistently pay attention to. That's why the modern world is such a trap. It's built to grab your attention and scatter it. Notifications, drama, comparison, endless content. And when your attention is scattered, you feel tired in a strange way, like you've been busy, but you didn't build anything. Because attention is the fuel for building. Without it, you're just reacting. This is also why people misunderstand manifestation. They think it's about wishing. But what actually changes a life is sustained attention. When you hold attention on something long enough, your health, your mission, your discipline, your behavior shifts. You start noticing opportunities that match your focus. You start ignoring distractions that used to own you. You start making decisions from a clearer place. That's not magic. That's the natural result of attention becoming stable. Imagination is the third tool, and it's the one people either misuse or ignore. Imagination isn't just daydreaming, it's rehearsal. It's the mind practicing a future before you live it. And the problem is, many people rehearse the worst future every day without realizing it. They replay embarrassment, they predict rejection, they picture failure. Then they walk into the day already defeated because they've lived the pain mentally before the world even asked them to act. But imagination can be used like a weapon in the good sense. You can rehearse a steadier version of you, not a fantasy superhero, just you with better control. You picture the moment that usually triggers you, and you imagine responding slower. You imagine breathing before speaking. You imagine keeping your word. You imagine leaving the room instead of escalating. You imagine doing the hard thing for 10 minutes instead of avoiding it. That kind of rehearsal changes behavior because the brain learns through repetition, and imagination is a form of repetition. This is why sleep listening fits here so well. When you're close to sleep, the mind is less defended, less performative. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're not trying to win arguments. You're just receiving. And what you repeatedly receive becomes familiar. It becomes a default. Over time, you wake up with a slightly different inner posture, less chaotic, more directed. It's subtle, but subtle is how real change begins. Now here's the practical problem most people run into. They try to fight thoughts directly. They argue with themselves. Don't think that. Stop feeling that. It usually backfires. A better move is to redirect attention and guide imagination. You don't have to defeat every negative thought. You just have to stop giving it the microphone. So, if your mind says you're behind, you don't have to debate it for 30 minutes. You can acknowledge it, then choose a better anchor. You bring attention back to what you can control in the next minute. Then you use imagination to rehearse the next right action. Not the whole future, just the next step. Then for this chapter, if you catch yourself spiraling, overthinking, replaying the past, predicting a disaster, then don't try to solve your life in your head. Shift the tool. Bring attention into your body for 10 slow breaths. Then imagine one clean action you can take right now and do it immediately. A message, a task, a short walk, one focused block of work. Anything that turns the mind from a courtroom into a workshop. Because the mind becomes powerful when it stops being a judge and starts being an instrument. 5. Silence as a technology. Most people think silence is just nothing happening, like you turned the volume down and that's it. But real silence, the kind that actually changes your life, is not empty at all. It's a tool. It's a technology. It's the oldest method we have for resetting the mind without needing anyone else to fix you. And the reason it works is simple. When the noise stops, you finally notice what has been running the whole time. At first, that can feel uncomfortable. Silence can make you feel exposed. Because the moment the distractions fade, the mind starts talking louder. Old conversations replay. Regrets show up. Anxiety tries to forecast the future. Random fears come out of nowhere. That's why so many people keep filling their life with sound, music, videos, scrolling, constant chatter. It's not because they love stimulation. It's because they're avoiding being alone with what's inside. So when I call silence a technology, I mean it's a way to sit with your own mind without being controlled by it. The Stoics practiced this in their own way. Marcus Aurelius didn't have quiet mornings like modern self-help talks about, but he did something deeper. He returned to himself. He would step back from the chaos and remind himself what matters. He treated his inner world like a place that required discipline and cleanliness. Not perfection, cleanliness. The ability to see what is without adding poison. The ability to stay steady even when the outside world is noisy. That's what silence gives you. Distance. And distance is power. Because when you're too close to your thoughts, they feel like reality. When you create a little distance, they become what they really are. Weather passing through. Breath is the steering wheel of this technology. I don't say that to sound like a wellness influencer. I say it because it's literally how the nervous system works. When your breathing is shallow and fast, your body believes something is wrong. Your mind then looks for reasons to justify the alarm. That's how you can feel anxious, for no reason, while you're lying in bed. The body is sounding the alarm, and the mind is trying to explain it. When you slow the breath, the signal changes. The body starts to feel safer. Then the mind stops producing so many urgent stories. It's like calming a child by holding them steady first, not by arguing with them. This is one reason listening while sleeping can be powerful. Not because sound waves are casting spells, but because the state you fall asleep in becomes a baseline your body memorizes. If you fall asleep overstimulated, you often wake up with that residue. If you fall asleep steadier, calmer breath, cleaner inner tone, you wake up with less inner friction. That changes your morning, and your morning changes your day. Silence also does something else that people rarely talk about. It exposes your addictions, not just drugs or alcohol. Emotional addictions, the addiction to drama, the addiction to checking, the addiction to being needed, the addiction to constant input. When you sit in silence, you notice the urge to reach for something, the urge to escape. That urge is information. It's showing you where your mind has been trained to avoid discomfort. And here's the good news. You don't need to fight the urge. You just need to see it clearly. Once you see it, it loses some of its authority. Buddhist practice often frames this as observing the mind without becoming the mind. Thoughts arise, feelings arise. You watch them without grabbing them, without turning them into a story you must live inside. That's not spiritual, it's psychological freedom. Now let's make this usable in a way that fits your actual life, not a perfect life. Silence doesn't require an hour on a mountain. It can be a small pocket, a short ritual that you repeat daily until it becomes part of who you are. 2 minutes before you check your phone in the morning. 2 minutes before you speak in a tense moment. 2 minutes before sleep. The point isn't duration. The point is consistency. Here's a simple way to do it tonight if you're listening in bed. First, reduce stimulation. Not forever, just for now. Let the room feel quieter. Then, take a handful of slow breaths. Not forced, not dramatic. Let the exhale be a little longer than the inhale. That tells the body, we can stand down. Then, when thoughts appear, don't chase them. Don't fight them either. Acknowledge them like you'd acknowledge a car passing on the street, and return to the breath. You're not trying to become blank. You're training one skill, returning. Because returning is what breaks spirals. Then, for this chapter, if you feel your mind racing tonight, then don't try to solve your whole life in bed. Make the only job settling. Take 10 slower breaths. Relax the jaw. Drop the shoulders. Then repeat one grounded line in your mind. Right now, I can rest. Not as a magical mantra, just as instruction for your nervous system. Silence isn't weakness. It's a form of strength most people never develop. And here's the question I want to leave in the air, because it's honest. What would change in your life if you stopped filling every empty space with noise? 6. The shadow mechanics. Desire and fear. If you've ever looked at your own life and thought, why do I keep doing this? Even when you know better, this chapter is for you, because most of the time, it's not a lack of intelligence that holds people back. It's two forces running quietly in the background. Desire and fear. They don't just influence your choices. They shape your identity if you never challenge them. And the tricky part is, they rarely show up honestly. Desire doesn't walk in and say, I'm craving. It often arrives dressed as ambition, romance, hunger for greatness, hunger for more. Fear doesn't walk in and say, I'm afraid. It arrives dressed as being realistic, being careful, waiting for the perfect time, avoiding risk. Both can be useful. Both can also ruin you if you let them drive the car. Let's start with desire. Desire is not your enemy. It's fuel. Without desire, nothing gets built. But desire has two versions. One is clean, one is desperate. Clean desire says, I want this, and I'm willing to build slowly. Desperate desire says, I need this now, or I'm not okay. That desperate version is where men lose themselves. You can see it in relationships. The moment you need someone to validate you, you stop being yourself. You start bargaining, you start over-explaining, you start chasing. And chasing doesn't create love. It creates imbalance. Even if you get what you want temporarily, you lose something deeper, self-respect. You can see it in money too. When money becomes a desperate need for identity, you start making emotional decisions. You chase shortcuts. You gamble with your future. You try to buy status instead of building strength. That kind of desire doesn't lead to freedom, it leads to dependence. You can even see it in the way people chase stimulation, not because they're weak, but because they don't know how to sit with the quiet discomfort inside. So they crave distraction, scrolling, snacking, dopamine, noise, anything to avoid being alone with themselves. That's desire turned into escape. Now fear. Fear is the shadow that pretends to be your friend. It whispers, "Don't rush, wait, prepare more, you're not ready." And sometimes that's wise, but most of the time fear isn't protecting you from real danger. It's protecting you from discomfort, and discomfort is not danger. It just feels like it. Fear shows up as procrastination. It shows up as perfectionism. It shows up as research that never ends. It shows up as planning a life instead of living it. And you can spend years in that loop while telling yourself you're being responsible. Fear loves delays because delays feel safe. It doesn't need to stop you forever. It only needs to stop you today. Then the habit of stopping becomes normal. And what becomes normal becomes identity. This is what Buddhism calls craving and aversion, the mind constantly chasing what feels good and running from what feels uncomfortable. That pattern makes life smaller because growth is always on the other side of discomfort. If you keep avoiding discomfort, you keep avoiding your own expansion. So what do? You don't erase the shadow. You learn to see it early. The Stoics would say, control your judgments. The moment you label discomfort as unbearable, you become fragile. The moment you label it as training, you become stronger. Epictetus had this steady realism. Life will test you, so practice meeting the test before it arrives. Not with anxiety, with preparation. And that's where repetition comes in again. This is why listening while sleeping can support you. You're not trying to hypnotize yourself into becoming fearless overnight. You're training a default response. You're feeding your mind a steadier interpretation so that when fear shows up, it doesn't immediately hijack you. The goal isn't to never feel fear. The goal is to stop obeying it automatically. Now let's make it practical, because this is where most people fail. They understand the idea, but their habits don't change. Here's the first step. Name it. When you feel yourself chasing someone's attention, quietly name it. This is desperate desire. When you feel yourself delaying something important, name it. This is avoidance. When you feel yourself reaching for distraction, name it. This is escape. Naming it creates distance. It turns the shadow from me into something happening in me. That sounds small, but it's huge. Because once it's not your identity, you can choose differently. Second step, shrink the next move. The shadow thrives when the goal feels huge. It loves overwhelm. It loves all or nothing. So you shrink it. If you're avoiding the gym, don't promise an hour. Promise 10 minutes. If you're avoiding work, don't promise a masterpiece. Promise 1 paragraph. If you're avoiding a conversation, don't rehearse it for 2 days. Send 1 clear message. Small moves break big chains. Then for this chapter, if you feel desire turning desperate or fear turning into avoidance, then don't negotiate with the feeling. Don't wait for motivation. Take 1 small action immediately that restores self-respect. 1. That action is a vote. It says, I'm the one driving. And here's the question I want you to sleep with tonight because it's honest and sharp. What do you keep calling logic that is really just fear dressed up as wisdom? 7. Polarity, suffering and transformation. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes something quietly terrifying. You can't escape pain. You can only decide what you'll become inside it. And that's where the whole idea of polarity begins. Not as a spiritual concept, but as a simple fact of being alive. Life moves between opposites, comfort and discomfort, certainty and uncertainty, love and loss, confidence and doubt. You don't get one side forever. You learn to move through both sides without losing yourself. Most suffering doesn't come from the pain itself. It comes from the shock of it, from the belief that pain means something is wrong with you or wrong with life. People don't just feel hurt. They add a story that says, "This shouldn't be happening." And that story is where the suffering expands. It multiplies the pain into a whole identity. The Stoics had a brutally calming approach to this. They didn't chase comfort. They chased dignity. They didn't deny hardship. They trained themselves to meet hardship without becoming weak, bitter, or chaotic. Marcus Aurelius wrote, like someone who kept being surprised by how unpredictable life is, and then kept reminding himself of the same truth. Don't let the external world steal your internal order, because the only real power you ever have is how you respond. That's polarity in practice. The outside world can be messy. Your inner world doesn't have to become messy with it. Now let's talk about the part people misunderstand. Suffering isn't good. Nobody needs to pretend it's good. But suffering can become useful. And usefulness is what turns pain into transformation. Transformation isn't a motivational speech. It's heat. It's pressure. It's the moment where life forces you to face something you've been avoiding, a breakup that exposes your attachment, a failure that exposes your lack of discipline, a betrayal that exposes where you trusted blindly, a loss that exposes what you truly value. Pain strips the performance away. It leaves you with the truth. And truth, as uncomfortable as it is a doorway. Because the moment you stop lying to yourself, you finally have something real to build with. This is where the law of polarity becomes personal. You can't have strength without vulnerability, because vulnerability is the training ground. You can't have peace without discomfort, because discomfort teaches you where your boundaries are. You can't have self-respect without moments that test it. Even love is a polarity, connection and risk. If you remove the risk completely, you also remove the depth. So the goal isn't to stay on the good side forever. The goal is to learn how to cross the bridge without falling apart. Buddhist teaching frames this with a simple but sharp distinction. Pain is inevitable, and a big part of suffering is resistance. Not resistance to pain, but resistance to reality. The mind keeps saying, "No, no, no," even after the event already happened. It replays the scene. It searches for a different ending. It fights the past as if the past can be negotiated. That's why some people can't heal. Their mind keeps reopening the wound and calling it thinking. You don't heal by replaying. You heal by accepting what is and then moving deliberately. Now, I want to ground this with a real story that carries the feeling. Viktor Frankl survived Nazi concentration camps during the Second World War. He didn't romanticize suffering. He saw it as brutal and unjust. But he also noticed something that's relevant to anyone listening right now. Even when you can't control what happens, you still have a small space inside you where you can choose your response. That space is tiny, but it's sacred. And in that space, you decide whether pain will make you wiser or make you bitter. Frankl observed that meaning can expand even when circumstances shrink. And that matters because many men today are living with a different kind of camp. Not physical walls, but psychological ones. The wall of comparison, the wall of shame, the wall of regret, the wall of I'm behind, the wall of fear that keeps them from starting. And the way out is similar. You choose a response that creates meaning rather than collapse. So what does transformation actually look like in daily life? It's not a dramatic overnight rebirth. It's a series of moments where you interpret suffering differently. Instead of saying, "This is ruining me," you say, "This is refining me." not as a cute phrase, but as a decision you prove with action. If you're becoming disciplined, the old version of you will suffer. It will complain. It will crave distraction. It will feel bored and restless. That discomfort is not failure. It's withdrawal from an old identity. If you're setting boundaries, you will feel guilt. That guilt is not proof you're cruel. It's proof you're changing a pattern that used to keep you safe. If you're choosing peace, you will feel the urge to react. That urge is not your true self. It's your old programming asking you to return to familiar chaos. This is why I keep saying, listen while sleeping, because the mind needs repetition when it's under pressure. In the heat of suffering, you won't rise to your hopes. You'll fall to your training, and training is repetition. Hearing the same grounded truth until it becomes a default response. Then for this chapter, if you feel yourself suffering and the mind starts resisting reality, replaying, obsessing, arguing with what already happened, then pause and ask one clean question. What is this trying to transform in me? Then choose one action that matches the stronger version of you. Not 10 actions. 1. A boundary. A disciplined hour. A walk instead of a spiral. A conversation you've been avoiding. Something that turns pain into progress. And here's the question to take into sleep tonight. What pain in your life have you been calling a curse? That might actually be the fire that forges the man you've been postponing. 8. Time, dreams, and the veil. There's a kind of pressure that doesn't leave bruises, but it still controls people. It's the pressure of time. The quiet fear of being late. The fear of missing your window. The sense that life is moving faster than you are. And what makes it even more exhausting is that you can't fight time directly. You can only fight yourself inside time. That fight is what creates the veil. The veil is when you're technically living, but you're not fully here. Your body is present. Your mind is somewhere else, rewriting the past, rehearsing the future, comparing yourself to someone you don't even know, replaying old mistakes as if replaying will fix them. And you can go months like that. Years. Always about to begin. Always getting ready. Always when things calm down. Meanwhile, time keeps moving, quietly, without negotiation. This is why the night is important. Night is the one time the world loosens its grip on you. The messages slow down. The performance fades. The noise drops. And when that happens, dreams appear like a different language. Sometimes confusing, sometimes emotional, sometimes strangely meaningful. I'm not going to tell you dreams predict the future. That's easy to sell, but it's not the most useful way to see them. A more grounded truth is this. Dreams often reveal what you're carrying. They show you what you've been avoiding when you're awake. They bring up unfinished emotion, hidden fears, unspoken desires, old memories that still have energy in them. Carl Jung described dreams as a doorway into the unconscious. You don't have to treat Jung like a prophet to recognize the experience. You've had nights where you woke up with a feeling you couldn't explain. You couldn't remember every detail, but something stayed with you. A mood, a tension, a scene that felt symbolic. That lingering feeling is the mind saying, this matters more than you admit during the day. And here's where the veil becomes real. Most people forget those signals immediately. Morning arrives with force, phone, tasks, identity, pressure, and the deeper messages get buried again. The day's speed becomes a blanket over the night's clarity. That's the veil of forgetfulness, not mystical forgetfulness. Modern forgetfulness, the kind that makes you forget what you promised yourself, forget what you really want, forget the truth you felt last night when you weren't distracted. The Stoics had a solution that sounds simple, but is actually a form of mastery. Return to the present, not as a cute quote, as a discipline. Marcus Aurelius kept reminding himself that the only moment you can act in is now. The past is untouchable. The future is uncertain. The only place your character can be practiced is in the present minute. And Buddhism says something even sharper. Much of what you call you is memory stitched together, a story built from the past. The danger is when you live as if that story is fixed. Then you treat the future as a repetition instead of a possibility. You say, "This is just who I am," when really it's just who you've been rehearsing. Dreams can loosen that rehearsal. Sometimes they show you what you fear. Sometimes they show you what you miss. Sometimes they show you a version of you that is freer than your daytime mind allows. Either way, they remind you there is more inside you than your routine suggests. This is where listening while sleeping becomes a quiet advantage, because you're feeding your mind a different rhythm near the moment it becomes most suggestible. Not suggestible like a trick, but suggestible like a learner. Sleep is when the brain consolidates memory, processes emotion, strengthens certain pathways, and weakens others. So the emotional tone you fall asleep with matters more than people realize. If you fall asleep in chaos, scrolling, stimulation, anger, anxiety, you often wake up with residue, like a mind that didn't fully reset. But if you fall asleep in steadier conditions, slower breathing, calmer inner dialogue, fewer mental fights, you create a cleaner night. And a cleaner night produces a clearer morning. That's not magic. That's nervous system hygiene. Now let's make this chapter practical, because time is only scary when you don't steer it. Most people live like time is happening to them. They wake up, get pulled, react, rush, collapse, repeat. And when life feels like that, even small problems feel bigger, because your mind is already tired. Steering time doesn't mean controlling every hour. It means controlling the first small decision that sets the tone. It means not letting the day immediately steal your attention. It means creating one anchor that says, "I am here." So here's a simple thing you can do tomorrow that changes your relationship with time. When you wake up, before you touch your phone, take 30 seconds and remember your word: calm, focus, discipline, peace. Then decide one thing you will do early that respects time. 1. It can be 10 minutes of work on something that matters, a short walk, preparing your day, anything that proves you're not drifting. That single choice is how you tear a hole in the veil. And if a dream lingers tomorrow morning, don't dismiss it and don't dramatize it. Treat it like a letter with no signature. Ask, "What emotion is this showing me?" Then ask, "What would a strong version of me do with that emotion today?" Even if the answer is small, do it. That's how you convert night insight into day action. Then for this chapter, if you feel time anxiety, feeling behind, feeling rushed, feeling like life is slipping, then don't try to solve your entire future. Come back to the present minute. Slow the breath. Choose one action that respects time and do it quietly. The future becomes less scary when the present becomes solid. And here's the question to carry into sleep tonight. Where has time been passing in your life while you weren't fully there? 9. Ritual and synchronicity. If you want to understand why some people seem lucky, don't start with their circumstances. Start with their rhythm. Most luck is rhythm meeting timing, and rhythm is built through ritual. A ritual is just a repeated action that tells your mind and body, "This matters." That's it. No superstition required, no complicated ceremony. When you repeat something consistently, your nervous system starts trusting it. It becomes an anchor, and an anchored mind makes better decisions under pressure. Most men don't lack potential. They lack a stable inner pattern. They live on random. They wake up and immediately get pulled by whatever is loudest: messages, headlines, problems, cravings, other people's moods. Then they wonder why they feel scattered and tired. A scattered mind can work hard and still feel like it's going nowhere because it's always reacting, never directing. That's why ritual is so important, not because it makes you spiritual, because it makes you intentional. Now, synchronicity. People often talk about synchronicity like it's a mystical sign. Sometimes that language can get exaggerated, but there's a grounded version that is absolutely real. When you commit your attention to a direction, you start noticing meaningful connections that you used to miss, not because the world suddenly changed, but because your perception became sharper. Carl Jung used synchronicity to describe meaningful coincidence. You don't have to prove anything supernatural to benefit from it. All you need to notice is this: meaning changes behavior. When something feels meaningful, you move differently. You become more decisive. You take action faster. You stop hesitating as much. And the moment you start moving, you meet more moments, more people, more opportunities, more information that can change your life. From the outside, it looks like fate. From the inside, it feels like alignment. That's what synchronicity often is: alignment made visible. But alignment doesn't come from wishing. It comes from consistency. And consistency is what rituals are built for. Think about it. If your life is chaotic inside, you miss signals outside. You overlook opportunities. You misread people. You waste days on noise. But when you're calmer, you notice more. You see patterns earlier. You sense what's worth your time. You catch your own bad habits before they cost you. That's why people who develop discipline seem to have better timing. Their timing is better because their mind is cleaner. Now, gratitude fits here. And I want to be careful with it, because people have heard the shallow version. Gratitude isn't pretending everything is perfect. It's not smiling through pain. Gratitude is training attention to see what is still working, so you don't build your life from panic. Panic makes you sloppy. Panic makes you chase. Panic makes you react. Gratitude doesn't erase problems. It stabilizes your mind so you can solve problems like a grown man. The Stoics had a tough kind of gratitude. It wasn't sentimental, it was practical. It was the ability to look at difficulty and say, even this can be used. Marcus Aurelius kept doing that with his own life, turning irritation into training, turning obstacles into exercises in character. That is gratitude as strength. Now let's make ritual extremely usable, because if it's not usable, it's just talk. You don't need 10 rituals, you need one that you can actually keep. And since this episode is built around listening at night, the ritual I'm going to give you fits perfectly into that space between the day ending and sleep beginning, the moment when your mind is quiet enough to be shaped. Here's the ritual, and it takes less than a minute. Before sleep, name one thing you appreciate that is real and specific. Not, I'm grateful for my life. Something concrete. A small win. A quiet moment. A person who supported you. A lesson you learned. Then name one thing you want to improve tomorrow, but without shame. Just clarity. Then name one aligned action you will do early tomorrow. Something that matches your chosen word. Calm. Focus. Discipline, peace. One small action. This ritual does 3 things at once. It stabilizes your nervous system. It trains your attention towards strength instead of scarcity. And it sets an intention that your brain can carry into the next day. And once you live like this, synchronicity becomes more common. Not because you're summoning it, but because you're present enough to see it. You'll notice the right conversation, the right warning, the right idea at the right time. You'll sense what's pulling you forward and what's draining you. You'll start making small course corrections that compound. That looks like the universe helping you, but it's often your own mind finally working with you instead of against you. Then for this chapter, if tomorrow feels random, heavy, or chaotic, then don't try to control everything. Return to your ritual. Return to your word. Choose one aligned action and do it early. That one act is like placing a hand on the steering wheel. The day won't be perfect, but it won't be adrift either. And here's the question to fall asleep with tonight. What would your life look like if you treated your attention like something precious instead of something you give away to whatever is loud? 10. From separation to return. If there's one feeling that quietly ruins more lives than people admit, it's the feeling of separation. Not just loneliness in the obvious sense. I mean that deeper sense that you're alone inside your head, carrying everything by yourself, trying to prove yourself, trying to hold it all together, trying to control life so it doesn't hurt you again. That separation is exhausting because it turns every problem into a personal battle. And a lot of men live inside that battle without realizing it. They stay busy, stay distracted, stay strong, but underneath it, there's a subtle ache. Like something is missing, like nothing fully lands, like even wins don't feel as satisfying as they should. That's usually not because they need more success. It's because they've lost a sense of inner connection. They've been living outward for too long. So when I say return, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about wholeness. Coming back to yourself in a way that makes life feel less like a war and more like a path. The Stoics had a grounded way to describe this. They spoke about living according to nature. People misunderstand that phrase and imagine forests and simplicity. What they really meant was, remember what you are. You're part of a larger order. You're part of time, part of society, part of cause and effect. And when you remember that, you stop treating every moment like it's a personal judgment. You stop taking everything so personally. Your ego relaxes. Your mind becomes less dramatic. Marcus Aurelius did this again and again. He would zoom out. He would look at the scale of time and realize how small a single insult is. Not to become cold, but to become free. Because freedom begins the moment you stop being emotionally hijacked by every little thing. And there's a quiet paradox here. The more you obsess over yourself, the more disconnected you feel. The more you return to something larger than your ego, values, purpose, service, nature, reality itself, the more stable you become. Return isn't self-absorption, it's self-alignment. Now, a lot of Eastern wisdom describes the same thing in different words. The sense of separation is partly a mental construction. Your mind draws borders and says, this is me, that is not me. Those borders are useful for survival, but they become painful when you treat them as absolute, because then everything becomes threat, comparison, competition. You start living as if the world is against you, and you respond with tension, control, and avoidance. Return is loosening that tight grip, not by denying who you are, but by remembering you're connected to something real and steady. You can feel this connection in a simple way. When you're anxious, your attention leaves the present and goes into the future. When you're resentful, your attention leaves the present and goes into the past. When you're addicted to validation, your attention leaves the present and goes into other people's minds. In each case, you become separated from the only place you can actually live, here. So return begins in the most basic place, the body. Not because the body is a trendy topic, because the body is the anchor that pulls you out of mental exile. When you slow your breath, you come back. When you relax your jaw, you come back. When you notice your shoulders and let them drop, you come back. It's simple, but it's real. And once you're back, you can do the next part of return. Act from values instead of emotion. Because separation often looks like this. You react, then you regret. You chase, then you feel empty. You numb, then you feel heavier. You argue, then you feel drained. That's a man living away from his center. Return looks different. It looks like choosing one honest action, even when you don't feel like it. It looks like setting a boundary without a speech. It looks like walking away from bait. It looks like doing the hard thing quietly. It looks like building a life you respect without needing an audience. That's why this entire listen while sleeping idea matters. It's not about changing reality with no effort. It's about changing reality without constant inner struggle. You're feeding your mind steadier interpretations. You're training a calmer baseline. You're building rituals. You're redirecting energy. All of that reduces inner friction. And when friction decreases, life starts feeling lighter. Not because life became easy, but because you stop fighting yourself. Now let me ground return to source in a way that doesn't float away into poetry. Your source is the part of you that can observe without panicking, the part that can pause, the part that can choose. It's the part of you that still exists even when emotions are loud. Some people call it conscience, some call it awareness, some call it presence. I don't care what you call it, I care that you practice returning to it. And the temple within is just a useful image for that. A temple is a place you enter to remember what matters. Your inner temple is that quiet space where you stop performing and start being honest. Where you don't need approval. Where you don't need to prove. Where you can breathe and think clearly. Most people don't lose their life because they're weak. They lose it because they forget that temple exists. They forget they have an inner home. So here's the simple way to live this chapter tomorrow. If. Then for this chapter. If you feel disconnected, restless, anxious, empty, overly reactive, then don't run outward for a quick fix. Don't chase stimulation. Don't chase validation. Return first. Slow your breathing for 1 minute. Ask one clear question. What is one honest action I can take next that I will respect myself for? Then do that one action quietly, because self-respect is a form of wholeness. And now, to end the entire episode in a way that feels like a friend speaking, not a preacher. Your life doesn't change because you wish harder. It changes when you stop abandoning yourself in small moments. It changes when you come back, again and again, until returning becomes your new normal. And maybe that's the real secret behind all of it. Not forcing reality, not begging life, just building a mind that finally feels like home. If you're falling asleep right now, let the last idea be simple. You don't have to fix your whole life tonight. Just return to yourself. One breath, one calmer thought, one quiet decision. That's enough. And tomorrow, do one small thing that matches the man you're becoming. Because that's how the new life starts. Quietly.